They bring Grease and Gears Garage here for you today. What's Grease and Gears Garage? We're just a bunch of dirty mechanics. We travel around the country with our shop. We bring it out, and then we bring people that have custom motorcycle shops, are doing custom motorcycle work. They do one thing for you that they do every day in their shop that it takes to build a custom motorcycle. So, ladies and gentlemen, today we got a great treat with us. We've got Athena Ransom. Athena is going to today talk to us about the essentials of wiring your motorcycle. I build motorcycles and hot rods at Sin Central Garage in Iowa, and I tell you what, I get people all the time that get their bike right up to the edge of being finished, and the wiring scares the hell out of them, right? You don't want to dig into the wiring, so Athena is going to talk to us today a little bit about wiring. Athena, are you on now?
I'm working on it.
She's working on it. Well, Athena, you could always talk into mine, see?
I like that.
Look at that. Athena and I don't have a problem with that. Now, Athena, how long have you been kind of in the custom motorcycle world?
I've been working on motorcycles since I was 15, and I'll be the big 5-0 this year.
5-0, no way.
25 twice. 25 twice.
25 twice. Well, I tell you what, Athena, we are going to get you into this. I'm gonna switch with you here just so you can hold this. You keep yours on, and I'm gonna let you hold this and talk into this one. And that way you have to talk. It looks like you're talking into my chest here.
Nice. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Grease and Gears Garage. I'm Athena. Check. Oh.
And there we have it.
Whoa. So just take this off, probably?
You'll be all right. Just drop it down. It's fine.
All right. Oh, much better. At least, you know, us women, we got to be holding on to something when we're talking. So, okay. I own Vagabond Chopper Company, and I'm in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. I have been working on motorcycles for about 35 years. I enjoy it. I'd like to say I'm here to give you the basics about wiring. Pretty much how it goes is wiring is just as important as even a bearing or a piston that you put into your motor, okay? In order for it to last a long time, you have to use all the proper tools and do the proper things to keep it going down the road. If we go to the first slide.
You can look at the monitors and you'll be able to see what she's doing.
So this is what a clean motorcycle looks like that's externally wired. Myself, I am a very prissy girl. I like my stuff externally wired so that when I'm on the road, it's very easily serviceable. I don't have any internal wiring, and it's clean, and it's very hard to see. Motorcycles, usually underneath the seat is where someone will hide 1,000 sins. I do my best not to do that. The next slide is the other side of the motorcycle, where you'll see that it's very clean and done externally. When you do internal wiring, there are certain things that you need to know, and that is that you get wear and tear and vibration on a motorcycle, no matter what brand of motorcycle it is. So if you're going to do internal wiring, we like to suggest that you bevel all your edges and use grommets everywhere that you can so that wires don't wear up against the frame and cause grounding situations to where you're broke down on the side of the road.
And for those of you that aren't familiar with that, I know sometimes we take it for granted. Sometimes we take it for granted that, you know, internal wiring, when you look at a custom motorcycle, you will notice that it almost looks like, well, how does it run? It doesn't have all the parts on it, you know. You'll see internal throttles that are run through handlebars. And internal wiring is where you simply, wherever that wire is coming out of what it needs to do, you drill a hole in the frame, and that's where she's talking about beveling those edges so you don't have a sharp wire, and you're going to run that through the frame so that you just can't see it. And so that internal wiring is how those custom bikes get it hidden. Now, when you do external wiring, some people will zip tie them, but other people, are you going over that?
Yes, actually, I am a prissy little girl. I don't like zip ties on anything that I do.
I don't like them either.
Okay, so I take little metal clips and I weld them to the frame. So in order to do that, when I'm doing my project, I map out the whole project. Then I know where all my little clips go, and then I can run my brake lines, my wiring, etc. that way. And then on the side of the road, should I have a problem, whether it's 10,000 miles or 100,000 miles down the road, it's easily serviceable. So with that said, the wiring job is only as good as the tools you use and the job that you do. We use in our industry certain tools for wiring that provide a good solid crimp. Continuity matters, grounding situations. So you want to take into consideration that there's things. If you've ever heard somebody say, oh yeah, I got a chopper and I got 7 wires and it runs great. That person did the best they could, but they do not understand the potential of what we call fire, okay? Personally, I use circuit breakers so that if something gets grounded out in a situation, the circuit gets cut and there's no fire. So your bike doesn't burn on the side of the road. That's an important integral part. What I find a lot of times is, like for me, I use a 30 amp for my main. I use 2 15 amps. I use one for my lighting circuit and then one for my ignition circuit. So,
and it's not like, a lot of us, I'm old. I'm not 25 like you, Athena. But, it's, I came out of hot rods, and we got into motorcycles, and so we would use car relays, and you're thinking, oh, it's going to be gaudy. They make some really slick now inline ways to be able to do this. It's nice and streamlined, too. So it's not gaudy. You can hide those kinds of things still.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And, for the most part, when it comes down to it and you're doing your wiring and stuff like that, personally, for me, my choppers in my shop, on average, we have about 21 wires. Depends on if you run a neutral light switch, if you certain things. I always use a starter relay, though, because that provides direct and constant circuitry to your starter solenoid, so you don't ever have a break. My battery terminals, I do my best. I only use the positive and the negative. Everything else, I wire from the starter post and from the starter relay. That way, it's clean on the battery, your connections are tight, and you don't have extra stuff that can come loose. Battery connections are the most important thing to going up the road. You know what I mean? So, the next slide. I want to remember what it is. It's horrible.
It's all right.
We're going to get to a slide here where I have some connectors and stuff like that. We use insulated connectors for certain things. And pardon me, because I have all these notes. I probably have 5 hours of content. I can't wire your bike. Every bike is different, depending on what circuitry you use, what starters you use, if you use a toggle switch or you use a key switch. Oh, and if you do use a key switch, make sure you don't hang a big old gaudy keychain off your key switch, because it will wear it out, and you will get stuck on the side of the road and lose your keys. So that's a definite given. I'm sure you see that a lot in the hot rods, because those switches are really old, and when they go turn, you get a big, especially us girls, we have every pom-pom and every keyring we ever saved. Yep. So we were talking about circuit breakers. Circuit breakers are very important, and what I see very much as common is that a lot of people don't pay attention. The circuit breaker is marked with a battery terminal and an auxiliary terminal. So if you use the auxiliary side of the terminal for the wires, it'll stop any ground out situation. The voltage flow will quit if there's a problem. If it's direct to the battery, you're going to have a big issue. The whole purpose of the circuit breaker is to cut the circuit so that, again, we don't have fire. We were at an event one time, and it wasn't funny, but I had a person park the motorcycle, and they were all taking pictures, and all of a sudden smoke was coming out from under the gas tank, and everybody was like, oh crap, what is that? And what it was no circuit breakers, 7 wires, and it's unfortunate, but we caught it in time. We didn't let it burn to the ground.
At Bikes, Blues, and Barbecue this year in Arkansas, there was a bike that caught on fire downtown. Again, it was a wiring issue, and it went viral, that fire right down in front of a bar. So you do want to pay attention to how you're wiring, the gauge of wire, and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, definitely. And when I'm doing a motorcycle and I use the circuit breakers, back in the day, Harley-Davidson used to make these clips, and they were metal clips for your circuit breakers. I was building my last build, and Harley came out with these new plastic clips. And when you put the circuit breaker in there, you cannot get it out. You absolutely can't get it out. So I installed one in this motorcycle. And I believe the next slide shows the headlight with the circuit breakers in it. So I had one plastic clip, and I had 2 metal clips. And I was talking to my husband, something was going on. All of a sudden, ping! This circuit breaker shot out of this metal clip. And she literally said, I don't want that crap anymore. I want the new updated stuff. So she got all new metal clips, but all plastic clips, but you can pull them out, and you actually need a screwdriver to pry it apart. So that's really cool, because when you're going up the road, if for some reason something happens and the circuit breaker does fall out of the clip, you know, I use the little well nuts, the plastic nuts, and I have the name of them here. I even have the part number. That's crazy.
Well, nobody here will know what the name of it is anyway.
I geeked out because they're little plastic acorn nuts that I put on the circuit breakers. That way, if they do fall out and they hit something, they don't ground out the whole circuit, and you don't have like a big issue. Never wrap wires around the frame or along the bottom of the frame. As I found out when I first started out, I said, okay, the gig is with me. My first motorcycle was given to me. I was in an accident. I was the passenger. And my guy at the time said, I bought him a brand new bike, a brand new Heritage Softail when they first came out. And I said, what are you going to do with the wreck? And he said, well, if you could put it together, you can have it. And I said, okay, you're on. He put a jar on the side of the workbench, and he said, every time you ask me a question, you have to put $1 in the jar. They were going to Daytona, figured they'd have $3,000 at least by the time I was done. He had $33 in that jar. So we went out on our maiden voyage, and we went somewhere, and everybody parked up on the sidewalk. Well, I had wired the bike. Needless to say, I used all black wire. Never do that. Nowadays, I use all Harley color-coded wire. I use the Dooch connectors because they're sealed with all the pins. Where I don't use the pins, I put the pin plugs so that no weather can get in there. But when I did this bike, I went over the curb, and I had wired it underneath the frame, and I hit the curb, and everybody left. And I heard, well, what are you going to do to get that motorcycle home? I said, what do you mean? And, you know, back in the day, it was pretty much ass, gas, or grass. No one rides for free. So that was the start of my career. I put all that stuff back together. I got under there, and I did it, and it took me about 2 hours. I got home. It was 3:30 in the morning, and I ripped it all out, and I started all over again. And I can honestly say that black wires don't help. You can't find anything, even with a test light and a meter. Test lights are your friend. I'm sure you know that in
Absolutely.
the hot rod world. When you need to know continuity from end to end with the wire, I use the meter. When I need to find a ground, I use my test light. I actually have one here.
And, you know, a lot of this seems like a mystery, but show people how that works. I mean,
you actually take this clip and you plug it to the battery side, the positive side of the battery, and then you take this and you go around and you probe for your grounds. Now, when you do a build, it's very imperative that you make sure you have the correct grounds. Like the motor needs to be grounded to the frame. So that's why we don't paint the pads where the motor mounts. The pads stay metal. So that provides the ground that's needed there. Let me go through my notes here. I'm all nervous. I haven't done this in a while, and I see all these happy, smiley people.
Look at all these friends. That's what Grease and Gears Garage is, though. We want to invite you into our shop. And so this is the kind of thing, if we were going to share with somebody, a couple of people in the shop, how to wire something, this would obviously be super helpful. So you're doing a good job.
Thank you. Okay, so like when I build a custom bike, I have certain choices. My headlight, I like to use a toggle switch on my headlight. The reason that I do this is because if you have a low battery situation and you need to start your motorcycle, you can always flip the switch off. And then you're more able to start your motorcycle in a low battery situation and charge it up as you ride along. I don't know. I have a lot of people that I work on their motorcycles. It's more of a hobby for them, so they don't get to ride a lot. Sometimes their bikes will set a month or 2 months, and they don't have a battery tender and things of that nature. So the charging system, when you ride the bike, charges the battery. And I'm sure a lot of people know a fresh battery is a good thing. Most of the time, what people don't know is that everything except the lithium-ion batteries of the new day and age have a memory. And when you go to the store and you buy a battery for your motorcycle or for your car, they hand you the battery and they say, okay, you're ready to go. And you go home and you put your battery in. Well, that's an unfortunate situation because they tell you it's dry charged from the store. Seriously, the charge from sitting on the shelf has gotten lower. And if you go home and you put that battery on a charger, on a 6-amp charger, 20, 30 minutes, you can bring that battery from 12.1 to like 13.2, and it keeps that memory. So that even though it's a low battery start situation, if your bike is sat for a month or two, once you ride it and it's charging again, you're getting the full voltage that you charged it all the way to in the maximum capacity. It keeps that memory. And the battery actually lasts longer. Batteries that you get off the shelf and are dry charge, you'll get a year, 2 years out of them. You're like, I just bought that battery. I charge them on the 6 amp charger, 20 minutes, and I'll get 4 or 5 years out of a battery. And that's very, at the price of all the things of today, you know, batteries aren't $25 anymore. So it's a good thing to do. So if you can keep that in the back of your mind, trickle charges 2 amps don't really work too much. And 10 amps, I don't like to do that because I'm a girl, and every once in a while I get distracted and I forget. And then, of course, the battery swells up, and then I've wasted it. So, but you get that in the cars, too. It's very common.
Absolutely. Well, you know, and that's probably the biggest – I think that's the biggest ripoff in the automotive and motorcycle world is that you buy a battery thinking that you're buying X amount of battery, and you're not.
And no one explains that they have a memory.
Particularly at bike shops, because bike shops will buy batteries and they'll sit on a shelf for months upon months. I mean, and so they can really, you can really have. I've seen batteries that would only take half amount of charge, and that was it because they just let them run down.
Yeah,
I mean,
and they just die faster. And like too, certain things. We were talking about ground situations. Like, I don't know, a lot of customers that come into my shop, I'll get where they have a melted headlight switch inside. Their plug is all melted. They run their high beam all the time, or it's not grounded correctly. So what I do is I run a dedicated ground to the headlight so that I don't have that issue. It's no melted plug, and then it doesn't ground to the neck bearing because you'll see there's residue and stuff like that. When it doesn't have a ground, it'll try to do that. So that's something. And then the taillight bulb socket, I always do that too because what it does for me, I build a lot of rigid bikes, and the dedicated ground to the taillight bulb socket actually provides a good ground in the vibration because it vibrates around in there. And anybody who tells you it doesn't, you know, they're just saying it to say it because everything vibrates. Everything. Good, bad, and indifferent.
Good, bad, and indifferent.
That's
right.
right.
The older I get, when I ride, the more stuff vibrates, I've noticed, and not stuff that's supposed to. Well, I jiggle like a bowl of Jell-O anymore.
I'm working that way, yeah. That's so.
Now, talk to us about gauge of wire. I see a lot of bikes come into my shop, and there's all kinds of different size wire on it. Talk to us some about the gauge of wire.
Yes, and the gauges of wire, okay, so you have, it's, the gauge is the thickness of the wire. The smaller the number, the bigger the wire. So when you're doing stuff, like when I do stereos on baggers, we're using 8 gauge and 6 gauge wire. We're using 18 gauge when we're wiring a bike, 16 gauge wire. Again, I do all different colors. On my personal bikes, I do every color in the Harley color code except for green. I substitute that with blue because for me, green and motorcycles are bad luck. So I have nothing on my motorcycle is green.
It was back in the day. Do you guys know that back in the day? It was a bad omen to paint your motorcycle green.
Yeah.
It was just it was an old wives' tale, basically. It was just a myth in the motorcycle world. It was bad juju to paint a motorcycle green. And so
somebody said it's a myth, but I wore a green shirt to get my motorcycle license and broke my foot.
You've got a green bike, though, right? He's got a green.
My son
green
just bought a green bike, a green Harley, and I'm like, okay. So yeah, the gauge wire matters depending on the application that you're using. For starter relays, we use a certain gauge. I'd like to say that heat shrink is very important. Like when you use connectors and you're doing your own custom wiring, I use the ring connectors, and sometimes I'll get insulated connectors and I'll take the insulation off because I need it for an application. But I always make sure that I put heat shrink on the end. That way the metal doesn't ever touch anything and, again, cause out a ground out situation. With regard to how you do heat shrink, it's always good to fit the wires as close as you can and then shrink over. I use a heat gun for long runs, but like when I do the little connector stuff, I use my lighter. I burn the crap out of my fingers all the time, but I use a lighter and I make sure that it's shrunk around it so that, again, there's no ground out situation. Electrical tape, black electrical tape. This is your friend on the side of the road. This is not your friend when you're building a motorcycle. This is not something you want to wrap around all your wires. Depending on where you live, for me, I live in Florida, South Florida, it's ooey gooey. And when you want to do something to it, it's much easier to just cut that heat shrink and then wrap it on the side of the road than to have to touch this it might be a girl thing.
And if you want to pay serious money to have your motorcycle rewired, just use that electrical tape on an entire wiring harness, because I'm going to charge you for taking that stuff off of there.
Oh, yeah, that's definitely not something I enjoy. Two, there's a lot of different applications. So you have all kinds of motorcycles. You have the newer models that have starter motors and don't have, their solenoids are all built in. Then you have the earlier models where they have the starter solenoid. And then you have like generator bottoms. When you're doing something and you disconnect your battery or you disconnect your generator, you need to make sure you repolarize your generator. It's very important you polarize it. That's something that I get. It's very common. No one ever understands that.
Well, that is something, and explain that process, because most people just get a motorcycle now and we have an alternator on it. We're just going to get on, push the button, ride, go park it, put it on the battery tender. In 2 months we're going to go ride a bike. But polarizing a generator, what is it about a generator that requires that?
Where's Barry? He knows everything about generators. Well, again, it's like the contacts inside, and that's a whole long drawn out thing. I have a PDF that's going to be on the website, and you can see I actually put up a slide where it gives you the whole procedure of polarizing the generator and why. I'm going to spit stuff out, and you could probably say it, but I'd give it to you in girl, and most guys wouldn't understand it. I don't know how you are, if your wife works in the shop at all ever with you, but for me, I go to my husband and I say, honey, where is that drill bit? The one that goes, and little steppy dudes on it, and he's like, oh, the unibit, honey?
Yeah.
It's in the third drawer, bottom box. So, speaking girl versus speaking guy, I might get you on that one. You might want to try with the generator thing. I'm not a...
I had an old... on my Ironhead Sportster, if the battery goes dead, typically that's when you're looking, when you've unplugged the battery, your generator will reverse polarize itself.
Yeah.
So basically, you're just going to take a wire and you're going to jump the polarization back to the other side. Very much like in England back in the day, they had earth grounds instead. So but polarization is something that very few people ever have to do anymore. But I remember on my Ironhead Sportster having to carry a piece of wire with me, because inevitably my battery would go dead. I'd have to put a new battery in it, and then I'd have to repolarize the generator. It's a process. God bless you. If you have an old bike, just make sure you have a nice old mechanic
that understands all about generators, because it's pretty crazy. Okay, and on some of the slides that'll be on the PDF, it's going to show you certain tools. Like when we do douche connectors, like I said before, I like to use those. They're sealed. Harley-Davidson uses them for everything. For me, what it does is it allows plug and play. I like to take my rear fender off, or I want to take my headlight off, or whatever. I can just unplug my douche connectors. They're all sealed units. The pins all fit in one spot, wire to wire. There is an art to that, though. Snap-on sells a tool. It's called an ABCDE crimper, okay? That allows for the proper crimp on the pins. Otherwise, you will never get the right crimp, and you will always have problems with your connection. Connections on the side of the road matter. When the crimp isn't done correctly, it's like I get a lot of customers who, I'm going to make my own battery cables. Okay, I have this tool, and it's on one of the slides. Again, I don't know where we're at with the slides, so I'll say it's going to be on the PDF on the website. I call it an anvil, and it smashes the battery cable in. And I use that with a hammer to do it because, again, that connection is very important, and it's very heavy duty. Then when I'm done with it, I heat shrink over it so that, again, I don't have anything grounded out, no problems, and it stays and it lasts, and we go down the road lots and lots of miles. That's the goal. When you're doing all this stuff, whether you're putting your motor together, you're wiring your bike, putting your brakes down, you want to make sure that you get the most out of it, because once it becomes no fun anymore, you don't want to do it. Then you just get thrown off to the side, you get the next bike, or you just give up on bikes. That's not the way to go, because you can't get what you feel on that motorcycle anywhere else in the world. No money can buy that either.
And there's a lot of projects sitting around in garages and in the back of barns where people just got frustrated just because they either didn't ask the question or they didn't take the time to listen to the answers that they were getting. The other thing about wiring bikes, because I know a lot of people out here probably have newer bikes. There's some things on a bike, you've said it several times, that continuity matters, that how much electricity is going to pass or how many amps you're going to draw. There are some things on modern bikes with computers, for instance, that you shouldn't try to snip and splice and stuff.
Oh, definitely.
For one that's really common that I see guys come in and say, well, my bike, it's running like crap. They'll change their own pipes, but they won't like how the O2 sensors, the length of that wire on the new pipes or whatever, and they will have cut those. That's one thing, those O2 sensors. If you don't have those properly reconnected,
the ECM can't read them.
ECM can't read it, and it'll just throw everything off. So there are several things like that.
Yeah, the newer bikes today have ECMs, BCMs, TSMs, turn signal modules, things of that nature. And, the bank angle sensors, if you drop your bike over, then it shuts the bike off. So you have all these things. But like what he's talking about, what Pat's talking about is even ABS brakes. When you change your brakes, say you change your bars and you need to bleed your brakes. Well, anything 2015 and newer, I have to plug you into my computer, and I need to tell that computer on your ECM that I'm bleeding your brakes, that I just changed all that. And the ECM will talk to all the parts, and then everything's allowed to move forward. Otherwise, you end up in limp mode or something like that where it doesn't run correctly. I do a lot of stereos, too. I flash the stereos. I'm a Rockford Fosgate girl. Well, I'm personally not. I ride a shovel head, and I don't have a stereo. My motorcycle makes its own music when she's not being a brat. But my husband, we have a whole computer program, and we do computer diagnostics, we do computer tuning, but we also do stereos. In the slideshow, you'll see there's some gold connectors. When you see that, don't ever use that for your regular wiring. That is specifically for stereos. We use maxi fuses and things of that nature, like Pat said, and what that does is it allows it all to talk to the ECM and move forward and keep going. Because once that ECM stops, you actually are done. You're done. There's nothing you can do except go spend $900. And the cool part, like for me, I did learn how to be like the locksmith, because I can now, if you lose your key fob, I can retrieve the PIN code out of your motorcycle with my computer, and I can get you a new key fob. Whereas if you don't have the PIN, the dealership can't retrieve the code. Locksmith, not criminal, locksmith.
Yeah.
Right. I can retrieve the code and get you a key fob, but if you can't retrieve your code like the dealer can't, you have to buy an ECM and the key fob to the tune of almost $1,000. So, it's critical to make sure when you choose someone that you're working with that they know these things about the newer bikes. I'm just learning. My husband's a techno geek with all that stuff. He can tune it, dyno it, all that stuff. Me, I just go play with my little air bleed on my shovel.
You know what I do, Athena? I get guys in, they want me to customize their bikes or these new bikes or these fancy ECMs and fuel injection systems. And so I pull the fuel injection off, I convert it to a carburetor, put a different ignition system on it that a guy, an Altman micro machine out of Germany, this guy that builds this little computer module I set up in it. Yeah, and I just eliminate the computers. That's my favorite thing in the world to do.
You're my kind of guy.
I just take them right back to carburetors, and then it's easy peasy. So I buy so many new bikes at the sale that don't run for a lot of these wiring issues or the ECM's fried or whatever. And so they send them to the sale, and I just bring them back, and I put them back. I convert them to carburetors. So, which is another good idea. If you guys are looking at doing a custom bike, this kind of wiring will get you back into being able to do that kind of stuff to your bike.
Yeah, and again, what you want when you're on the road, again, if it's not under warranty and you don't understand it a lot, you want something that's easily serviceable on the side of the road. And just a brief little story, but we were out in Sturgis one year, and we were all on a ride. And I'm sure Chris remembers this one, but we had a couple of guys, and we were all headed somewhere, and we had a truckload of stuff, and the bike broke down. And so they're all standing there, and they're all looking around, and they're like, okay, well, we're going to have to move some crap out of the back of the truck and put the bike in there. I was like, no, I'm a shovelhead girl. Let's stop for a minute. So I go over, and I start peeking around at the wires, because the first thing you're going to do, why did it just shut off? I did a little research, put 2 wires back together, and off they went. Later on, they were all like, yeah, big-time guys out there, and here comes this chick, and she fixed your motorcycle. But again, it's just that serviceability and knowing what to look for. It's not rocket science. Your manual does actually give you an exploded view. The older manuals give it to you in the actual service manual. You have a complete wiring diagram that tells you everything, where all your connections go. Just like when you're servicing your bike in the front, it gives you all your critical fasteners to tighten and touch during maintenance. So nowadays, the newer books, they give you a service manual, but they also have an electrical manual because it's gotten so intense and so critical with all these computers and everything. So that's a whole nother.
And whether you're here or whether you're watching us, we Facebook Live this, so you can also go back and pick this back up on our YouTube channel, Grease and Gears Garage. And the reason we're doing Grease and Gears Garage is whether or not you're going to wire your own bike or not, and you might be out there saying, well, that's cool, listen to Athena talk about wiring. You need to understand the basics of wiring, if for no other reason, so that when your bike is doing something weird and the mechanic, wherever you take it, whether it's to a dealership or to a local shop, and somebody tells you you have a wiring issue, and you can say, let me see, and you can at least go back and understand what they're telling you. I have seen so many people get taken advantage of, not necessarily because a shop was dishonest, but they really didn't know how to do wiring except from scratch. They didn't know how to repair it, so they would just replace everything until it was fixed. We live in a day and age now where there aren't a lot of mechanics. There's a lot of parts replacers. And so, but if you understand the basics of wiring, and they can explain to you what they're going to be doing, you will better understand what they've done. Plus, once you understand either the simplicity or the complexity of it, you'll have a better understanding of what you should be charged or not charged for that particular repair. So those kinds of things are really important. The battery life, those kind of things are critically important.
And I learned at a young age that electrical was really hard for me when I started out. It's a full, complete circle. And then when you have a problem, it's because you have a break in the complete circle. So that's where you can go and look back and look for certain things. Another thing that I always tell everybody is when you wire a bike, whether you're wiring your own bike or if you're looking at your wiring, you have to be aware of the moving parts around you. The swing arm, the exhaust for heat, the rear belt. You want to make sure that none of your lines or your wires are anywhere near that where they can get chafed or get rubbed or melt and, again, cause you wiring issues down the road. I see a lot of people that from the ignition, they'll get really close to the exhaust pipe, it'll touch it, and it burns up because they tried to do it themselves. Again, that's all in how you do your wiring. It's a full circle, and there's a lot to it. The ignition, it goes pretty much battery, ignition, around to your brake light, your tail light. Brake lights, that's another thing. I use a brake light switch, and I really enjoy the fact that it's all one unit. I get it from Biker's Choice, and it's really cool. It goes right in the front master cylinder, but the wire's on there. And what I did learn about that is that when you're screwing that brake light switch in, you have to twist the wires and get them all ready before you hook them to anything. Girl note. That's a girl note. That's me being a girl. So, yeah, and there was one other thing that was very important that and I don't know, a lot of people, there's reference material out there. If you can ever find, like, the old tech tips, Easy Riders used to put out the books. Yeah. And inside, on the slideshow that you'll see in the PDF, there's cool little pictures of the different wiring, Sportster 74, generator bottom 74, cone motor 74, and it's cool. It's done in an artistic way. But there's different things that they give you an actual basic how to do it. Again, I could wire a whole motorcycle here, but you wouldn't really be able to. It doesn't necessarily apply
unless
to
it's
you.
your bike, yeah.
Right.
So
depending on key switches and all the things.
there's so many great. The Google machine is a phenomenal machine out there. You can Google anything. You can Google common problems with your particular bike. You say common electrical issues, and it's going to pull it up. And what you're going to see is, out of the million things that it could be on your bike, it's probably only going to be 5. Mm-hmm. There's going to be 5 things that consistently go wrong with a motorcycle. And so, you can look around on your particular model, if that particular model year had a particular issue or whatever, and they're going to give you, and you can find all kinds of great resource material out there.
And a lot of times, like even in our shop, I'll get phone calls and people ask me, they'll say, oh, it's doing this, this, and this. And I say, okay, check this, this, and this, because like Pat said, there's very common reasons for certain things that go wrong. Your charging system is very important, your voltage regulator, all those things, they all encompass your wiring. And that's something that, as Pat said, you'll have very common problems, very regular things that go wrong. So if you have someone in your neighborhood that's a good mechanic that you can call up, a lot of times they know right off the bat. Like if you call my shop, I can tell you, oh yeah, okay, well we're going to check this, this, and this because that's the symptom. That's what it's doing. So pretty much that's...
Most commonly on a new motorcycle, if your battery cables are loose, your ECM requires a certain amperage to be able to do anything, and it won't even start. So the first place to always start, I think we're towards the end, is your battery terminals. Check to make sure they're tight. So, well, Athena, you've given us so much information. I appreciate it so much. It's just... I don't give extra credit for her being a woman or anything else. You're just a good rider, and you love motorcycles, and you're a good mechanic. So I just appreciate having you around. And hit her up, man. Hit her up on social media if you have a question.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, she's going to be back on Sunday, and we're doing a girls' garage segment, right?
Yeah, actually, it's for ladies and new riders, and we're going to talk about different things about learning to talk to your techs, your parts people. It's kind of like...
So, guys, they used to say the best place to pick up a woman's outside the ladies' room.
No.
Actually, the best place to pick up a woman, Sunday right here, because it's going to be packed wall to wall with hot chicks looking for information. And so we're looking forward to having you back and talking about that. Before we get out of here, I want to make sure that we mention Progressive Motorcycle Insurance is giving away a brand new Indian Scout.
Ladies and gentlemen, gather around for a unique look into the world of custom motorcycling. We've gathered some of the industry's top builders and fabricators on this stage to show you their skills live and in person. Watch as they chop, grind, and weld their creations into existence right before your very eyes. Feel free to ask questions at any time directly to your host, Pat Jansen. The doors to the shop.
Scout, no cost to you. Just go ahead and go right over to the Chop Shop and check that out. And check us out on Grease and Gears Garage YouTube channel. You can check us out at Cycle Source Magazine's Facebook page and that. And if you enjoyed this, whether you're on Facebook Live or here live, hashtag ProgressiveMC, at ProgressiveMC. Let them know that you heard it here first from Athena Ransom. Ladies and gentlemen, give it up for Athena.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Guys, we'll be back at 7 o'clock, but they got some great music. So
ladies and gentlemen, gather around for a unique look into the world of custom motorcycling. We've gathered some of the industry's top builders and fabricators on this stage to show you their skills live and in person. Watch as they chop, grind, and weld their creations into existence right before your very eyes. Feel free to ask questions at any time directly to your host, Pat Jansen. The doors to the shop are open, so pull up a stool, kick back, and welcome to the Grease and Gears Garage.
We got all this shit handled, I just thought the additions that we'd made.